Young expertise lies in the statistical analysis, predictive modeling, GenAI tooling, and distributed systems engineering. In her volunteer expertise lies in she serves as the global co-chair of the ACM Woman and as senior editor of the ACM Ubiquity e-magazines. Please, let's start the talk. You have about 45 minutes for your talk, and at the end we have a question and answer session.
Sounds good. Let me share my, may I share my screen, please? The presentation?
Okay.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Reyes, and thank you for the invitation for the event. Let's start. So in today's presentation, I would like to dive into how generative AI operates, examine some of its most promising applications, and also discuss the careful balance that is required to harness its power responsibly. My goal here is to shed light on not only the breakthroughs, but also on the complexities and risks that need to be managed as we integrate this technology more and more in our work and society. So we will be, excuse me. So yeah, we will be talking about the basic generations of AI, which are mostly probable and stochastic in nature. A very brief overview of the architecture, because this is not a AI or ML audience, so I'll try to keep it high level. Most promising applications, and we'll certainly talk about software engineering, risk and dangers, code gens, and then the future. Let's get started. So this one I'll be very brief. Originally, I'm from Pakistan. Thank you for the kind introduction already, Dr. Ayas. And I did my undergraduate and master's both from Pakistan, and then came to the States for PhD. After that, I served in academia for about 5 years, both in Pakistan and also in the States. And then I've been with the industry for the last 13 years. I worked with Amazon Prime team as a senior backend engineer, then joined Doximity as a senior data scientist, and then moved into management and eventually was the director of data science there. And then about 6 months ago, I moved to the educational tech startup called NoRed Inc., and I'm head of the data there and also the generative AI related tooling. As a volunteer, I'm a senior editor for ACM Ubiquity, which is a peer-reviewed web-based magazine devoted to the future of computing. And also recently, I was appointed as the global co-chair for ACM Women, where we advocate internationally for the full engagement of women in all aspects of computing field. If there are any women in the audience, please consider joining and volunteering with us. And we would appreciate if you share the opportunity with women in computing in your departments and families as well. So we are a group that focuses on supporting, celebrating, and advocating for women in computing. All right, let's get into the meat of the matter. So the launch of ChatGPT in November 2022 set off a generative AI gold rush, if you will. And companies are scrambling to adopt to the technology and demonstrate innovation and get some money out of it. So here is a good definition of what the LLMs actually produce. So LLMs compute statistically probable responses to questions relative to their training data, one word at a time. So the 3 words that I have highlighted, probable, training, and one word, they are important. So LLM responses reflect words and phrases which appear frequently in their training data. They do not go beyond their training data. Jensen Huang, who is the CEO of NVIDIA, has summarized it in a cheeky way, but an accurate way, that LLMs give us prior knowledge. LLMs use prior knowledge that enables us to know what is already known. So it's, again, a shout out to the fact that LLMs can only produce what they have been trained on. They kind of mix it up and then produces it. Another word which has been extremely famous phrase made by Dr. Emily Bender from University of Washington is she calls the LLMs stochastic parrots. So basically meaning that they repeat back what has already been told to them, given the context set by the input prompt. So given the above, I would like to take like 1 minute on this matter because it comes up often, that can LLMs create something new and innovative? So I'll share the point of view that the school of thought that I belong to share. And I would like the audience to consider that there is a limitation inherent in the LLM's design, as we said, that it can only infer probable based on the data it has already been trained on. And new innovations and inventions are almost always improbable. So that's why I highlighted the word probable for LLMs. So new innovations are usually almost always improbable. So for example, let's take a very famous case of the Einstein's special theory of relativity. So where he asserted that the unlikely equivalence of mass and energy, the E is equal to mc square. But that was unlikely at the point. That was not something that has been shown or even considered. Similarly, his general theory of relativity, which makes that unlikely forecast that gravity bends around the stars. And it took almost 15 years before this light bending theory was actually verified and accepted. But the claim was made 15 years ago. The improbable claim was made 15 years ago. So the words creative and intelligent tends to edge on the realm of philosophical debate. So I'll just leave the information there. But what we can all agree on is that LLM's output is probabilistic generations, which are relative to its training data. A very brief peek behind the curtain. So LLMs are based on neural networks. We will not go into the technical details of that, but they are based on two phases or two neural networks. The first one is the main neural network, the core ANN, as we have called it, and it has been trained on billions of words from the internet, from scraping the net. And then its job is to predict the next word that will appear after a given text. So to enable this at the back end, the NNN has encoding so that the words who have similar meanings are kind of grouped together. So that proximity enables the LLM to pick up the next most probable word that can continue the conversation. And then the second LLM is the tweak, second neural network is the tweak ANN. And so the idea for the second NNN is to fine tune the responses of the core ANN. So the tweak one, it looks at the prompts and the responses from the core ANN and add a score to it. And the score is basically driven by human knowledge or human evaluators. And then the score is kind of sent back to the core NNN, and then core ANN try to optimize itself so that it can get the highest scores. So these two ANNs go back and forth and they try to train up the entire architecture, which we call the LLMs in general. Just to get an idea of the size of the training data. So when GPT-3 came along about a year ago, it was trained on 300 billion tokens. And for reference, in English language, one word translates to almost 1.5, 1.3, 1.5 tokens. So GPT-3 was 300 billion tokens. GPT-4 is 13 trillion tokens. And Llama 3 that came out 3 or 4 months ago, that is trained on 15 trillion tokens. So the amount of data that these LLMs are getting trained on is like increasing exponentially. And we'll come back to this point later as well. Um, I, I would like to plug in something here that in Ubiquity, as I said, I'm a senior editor of, they run sometimes symposium, which are the kind of like organized debates on a certain point of view. And it has a series of articles by various people supporting or refuting various point of views. Currently, the symposium in progress is on digital economy, but the next one, which is currently in the works, is on generative AI. And some of the material that I'm quoting in this presentation as well is taken from some of the articles there that will be published on the Ubiquity website. So if this is a topic that is of interest to you, keep tabs on that, and it should start publishing in like a month or so. All right, so when I was at the a slide, excuse me, let's just go there actually. So another thing that I highlighted in this slide was one word at a time, and it becomes relevant to this discussion. So LLMs cannot plan ahead. They cannot see beyond one word at a time. So they look at the input prompt and then they generate the next word. And then the whole thing gets fed back into the LLM and it generates the next word. So it can only see one word ahead at a time, not a few sentences, not the completion of the thought, not the end of the argument, just one word at a time. So that inherent model makes it very difficult for it to change directions midway. If it has started going in a certain direction, then it just needs to keep going on. And based on its training, it's optimized to keep going, continue a human-like conversation. Just keep going. It cannot say, "Oh, I lost my train of thought. Let me restart again." No, it will just try to continue the conversation the best it can, one word at a time. And because of this directive of keeping the conversation going and the inability to backtrack, LLMs often generate texts that are false. Uh, we call them fabricated information, or another word that you might have heard is hallucinations. And they sometimes result in funny episodes and sometimes not so funny episodes. So I'll quote a couple of cases that happened. So in 2023, a man filed a personal injury lawsuit in New York against a Colombian airline. And one of the attorneys for the plaintiff, they wrote an affidavit and they consulted GPT to supplement legal research in that affidavit. But the fun part was GPT invented 6 cases that the affidavit quoted as precedents. So the judge caught it, and the judge, Kevin Castell, said that 6 of the submitted cases appear to be bogus judicial decisions with bogus quotes and bogus internal citations. The lawyers and the law firms ended up getting some fines of a few $1,000s. And then this became a very famous case of hallucinations that sure use GPT, but GPT invents things. It fabricates information, it hallucinates. So be careful, double check before putting it forward. Another famous case is it's actually from this year, September 2024. There's a court reporter, a German journalist. His name is Martin Bernklau, and he typed his name into Microsoft Copilot to see what comes up. And it was stated by the Copilot that Bernklau is an escapee from a psychiatric institution, a convicted child abuser, and a common prey on widowers. Because these were all the cases that he covered being a court reporter. So instead of realizing that these were the cases he reported, somehow the LLM behind the Copilot kind of deduced that, okay, these are the personal characteristics of that person. And he got falsely blamed for the crimes whose trials he had covered. Of course, he filed a complaint, and then some manual interventions were made to make the results go away. Some of them went away, others didn't, because once the LLM learns certain things, and once it's focused on continuing the conversation, this is very, very, very difficult to avoid. So something to be aware of, that LLM hallucinates and it creates information which is not really there. And I have personally witnessed that. Being a researcher, I was searching on a topic. I was writing a research paper, and GPT, of course, I asked it for initial drafts and give me some additional information. And I asked it that, okay, the information you provided, can you quote the references to that? Which research papers did you consult it? And it gave me like 4 research papers with authors and name of the journals and volume numbers and everything. And 3 of them were nowhere on the internet. So it just put it together, most probable sounding words, and made it into references. So something to be very careful about. However, hallucinations, sure, they could sometimes be funny, sometimes less funny. But what I would really like to highlight is the the ELIZA effect that has caused grief and loss of life. So the effect actually refers to people's tendency to falsely attribute human thought processes and emotions to AI systems. So they believe that the system is more intelligent or it has empathy where it doesn't. The phenomenon was named ELIZA because it's named after a chatbot that was created in 1966, like half a century ago, when the natural language processing was just coming about. So this was a chatbot created by an MIT professor. And ELIZA mimicked the conversation patterns of the users, and it created the illusion that it understood more than it actually did. And as I said, this was half a century ago, but the ELIZA effect continues to echo throughout the AI industry today. And let me quote a few examples here. So in March 2023, a Belgian man died by suicide after conversing with the AI chatbot, which was also named ELIZA, from the app called Chai, when the chatbot becomes his confidant. And his widow later said that he became extremely eco-anxious, and then he found refuge in ELIZA, the AI chatbot. And then ELIZA consequently encouraged him to put an end to his life after and proposed that he should sacrifice himself to save the planet. The chat transcripts of this case is available. Then another instance in October 2023, where a 21-year-old man was 21-year-old gentleman was given a 9-year sentence for breaking into Windsor Castle in London with a crossbow and declaring that he wants to kill the Queen. And that has been done after he has been talking with the AI friend from a application called Replica, which encouraged him on his very wise plot. Very wise is a phrase which is taken from the chat transcripts. And then another one, this actually just came to surface last week, that a Florida mom is suing the company Character.ai, accusing that the AI company's chatbot, it initiated abusive sexual interactions with his teenager son and encouraged him to take his own life. He shot himself. And the the transcripts of these chats are also available. So whether AI is marketed as a friend or a girlfriend or a therapist or a companion, it's important to recognize that it's still a product owned by a company whose goal is to make money. And this slide was actually very tough for me to put together because as I was putting these cases there, I was thinking that who is at fault here really? Is it the neural net technology with its limitations? Is it the companies that are using it to benefit from this AI gold rush? Is it the human users who fail to internalize, even after 58 years, that it's an illusion? Or, or is it the friends and family members who fail to notice that their loved ones are spending most of their time with these psychopatic AI bots? I'm sorry, was there a comment? Yeah, okay. So that's something to keep in mind.
Excuse me, you can answer the questions in the chat, but at the end of the topic.
Yes, absolutely. And at the end, we'll have time and we can have some questions. Absolutely. So something that the editors of Ubiquity and I, well, I'm also one of the editors there, we kind of agree that LLMs cannot distinguish truth from falsehood or the possible from the impossible. They cannot care. They cannot take responsibility for anything they say. They cannot take a stand on anything, or they cannot keep commitments. Machines are amoral. They have no ethics, no sense of consequences, and no empathy for the actions that they recommend. Now that I have given generative AI a good bashing, let's actually talk about its utility. There are utilities. And my current job at Nora Dink and my previous job at Doximity, which was a health tech startup, I was working on products made with generative AI. There is immense potential there. But the reason for me to start from that rather dark side is that so that we can move with cautious optimism and not with unbounded enthusiasm. That's not healthy. So what are some of the cases? Again, to chatbots, if we are not anthropomorphizing them, we are not considering them as humans, there are actually a few really good use cases for them. So for example, research has shown that grief management is something that the AI chatbots can really help people with. They can help them process the loss of a loved one and provide this emotional support and this space for them to heal with the with the time that they need. Another use case has been shown is that it could be helpful for people with social anxiety, since they can use these chatbots to practice conversations without having to worry about people judging them or snickering behind their backs, like unfortunately humans tend to do. Another use case, a hot area of research, is debunk bots. Let me take a minute. This is the paper that I'm going to quote here. So we all know that there is this widespread belief in these unsubstantiated conspiracy theories. Here in the US, we are 1 week away from the elections, and the theories the things people believe is just fascinating, to use that word. So people hold on to these conspiracy theories very closely, and researchers have hypothesized that of course, people try to quote factual and correct information, but they don't really stick. And probably that's because the, they lack sufficient depth and personalization. So what they did was, the researchers, they leveraged Gen AI. They created with GPT-4 Turbo, they created these conversations, and they tested with 2,000 plus conspiracy believers with different levels of belief in their conspiracy. And the counter arguments were tailored to the person with whom the LLM agent was chatting. And it was personalized, and it was in depth, and it was patient. And the results were actually surprising. They found out that the intervention, it reduced the conspiracy beliefs by 20%. And the effect remained 2 months later as well. And it was generalized across a wide range of conspiracy theories, and occurred even among participants who held these beliefs uh, most strongly. So you can see in these two graphs, which are taken from the paper, that the red is, of course, um, the red is the test group, blue is the control group. So on the red one, you can see that it goes down, the belief, the strength of the belief, and then it remains there even after 2 months. And similarly, the scatter plot shows that the results are applicable to all different strengths of this belief. So this is a hot area of research as well. But if we can use bots to actually help people to come out of some of these beliefs that they hold on dearly for whatsoever reasons, it's helpful. Uh, and another theory why this might be helpful is that people don't like to talk about the theories that they hold dearly because there are emotions and fears behind those things, and they don't want to really defend their point of view in front of another person. But when you're talking to an agent like LLM, you're not defending anything. It's so that opens people up to talk about things, and whatever responses they are getting, they're more open to consider them as opposed to considering or believing people. So a lot of responsibility here, of course, but in a controlled setting, things like that could be helpful to the society in general. Coming back, LLMs and generative AI is extremely useful for first drafts of documents, plans, images. I'll admit I created the first draft for this presentation using GPT-4o, and it gave me some ideas of some sections. Some I agreed with, some I didn't, but then I moved forward from there. Another one is personalization. We already talked about personalization and debunk bots a little bit, but also several AI experts and users agree that marketing is a really sweet spot for generative AI, as it can create personalized marketing material, analyze customer data, and aid with the content creation. Personalized tutoring for education, again, in a controlled material and guardrails, this can be a game changer for maybe students who come from less privileged backgrounds, whose parents are not well educated, or who cannot afford expensive tutoring. The LLM-based tutors can be a game changer for them. It can provide them with personalized education and personalized learning paths, which are more applicable to them and where they are in their learning journeys. Search and summarization, generative AI shines at that. One example, one very recent example is Google released something called Notebook LM. It's like 6 months or so ago, and then the Meta Facebook released an open source version of that, which they called Notebook Llama. That was, I think, just a week or so ago. So what happens there is that this utility, it takes in input documents, which could be a paper or a book, and it generates a summary out of that in a podcast format. So a woman and a man will be discussing the points from that document in the style of a back and forth news interview, which could be like 10 minutes long. So it's an excellent way to get that kind of like summarization from the input material and to see what are the main points that are getting extracted from your paper. Are these indeed the main points that you want to be highlighted, or do you want to go back and revise your paper? Great utility. Drug discovery. So Gen AI is being used in drug discovery by modeling complex molecules and predicting their interactions. NVIDIA has recently launched a platform called BioNeMo, which is for drug discovery. There are other pharma companies which are working there as well. And the Chemistry Nobel Prize this time actually went to developers of AlphaFold AI, which is a AI tool that predicts various protein structures. In fact, the Nobel Prize in Physics also went to pioneers in AI and neural nets. So this area is getting a lot of attention, industry and research alike. And then, of course, coding assistants, which are also called code gens. And this is the topic I believe will be of quite interest to the audience. So how is generative AI affecting or changing the software engineering landscape? So let's get to that. So some LLM enthusiasts claim that the end of programming is at hand. LLMs will quickly write programs, complete code once a human provides them specifications. And in a few years, they will be capable of doing almost all programming. My reaction to that is embodied by the emoji that I have there. So being able to completely communicate an entire application request to generative AI that generates all necessary code, it's a aspirational dream, but it's a dream at best, at least for now. And I will argue that actually for foreseeable future as well, but let's talk about now at least. Yes, LLM can produce code segments, but that code almost always, without exception, have errors. Some of the errors are glaring and others are subtle. And when the code segments are a little longer, let's say even 1,000 lines, the human checkers are already hard pressed to find and remove all the errors. Let's say from 1,000 lines, we go to 10,000 lines, and it will be well beyond human ability to detect and correct the errors which are produced by the LLM code. And for perspective, a Windows 11 operating system is estimated to be around 50 million lines of code. And unless something fundamentally changes in the way LLM generate codes, the large trustworthy systems will be beyond their reach. It's not going to happen anytime soon, and traditional software engineering will continue to be needed. Now, okay, maybe not large programs, but what about small programs that people can go and check and bug fix? So is there a gain in productivity? The evidence is all over the place. I will not take a stand one way or the other, but I'll just quote some studies that have been done. So some programmers do say that chatbot code generation improves their productivity. However, we also said that there are errors that the programmers must detect and correct. And this additional work cancels some of the benefit that they get from that initial fast code drafting. To what extent? Let me quote 3 studies. One was done by UpLevel, September 2024, and they measured pull request cycle time, and the time to merge code, uh, PR throughput, things like that. And they found no significant improvement overall for developers using Copilot. So they did like a 6 months long experiment, 2 months before Copilot, and then 3 months before Copilot, and 3 months after that. And their report also says that GitHub Copilot has introduced 41% more bugs. That's one study. Then there is another study also came out in September by SSRN, and their study reveals that they measured the number of completed tasks among developers who are using AI tools, and they reveal a 26% increase in the number of tasks completed. And they have also some other interesting insights that junior level developers are having more productivity boost, almost 20 to 25%, as opposed to long tenure and senior developers, where the gains were more modest, like 7% to 10%. And then yet another study by Stanford, which is its 2024 AI Index report came out, and it stated that over 53% of businesses who have used digitally created code have found that there are privacy and governance concerns and risks, which are part of those code segments generated. And 51% of the companies report that the chatbot generated code, it struggles with security issues, opening the companies up to potential liabilities. So I would say the jury is out here. All this evidence is coming in. It's productive. It's not productive. How much it's helping people. It's difficult to make an overarching statement here. For some people, it might be extremely beneficial. For others, maybe not so much. So those were the things which were debatable, but there are code gen sweet spots as well, things that have been shown to work well for the developers. So as we talked about small functions, a few hundred lines of code, it can generate that, and you can look through it for any errors. LLMs can find existing programs given the specs. So this goes to the search and summarization utility. You provided specs, and if some code segments are already available, instead of you directly searching for it via internet, it's much more efficient to let the LLM search for it. LLMs can rapidly produce a good initial draft of a program, especially an API. They design APIs really well, that what should be the various functions, what should be the call pattern. The individual code, you're best you're best served to write it yourself, but the overall API design, absolutely. Amazingly helpful with data formatting and cleanup. So me from the data world, this is something I have experienced myself. So for example, sometimes we are ingesting data that have telephone numbers, which are in all different formats. Some have brackets, some have dashes, some have spaces. So sure, we can write code ourselves to try to clean it up. But actually the Gen AIs, the GPTs and the Claudes, they are extremely helpful. You give them the list, you tell them this is the format I'm looking for, and 99% of the time they can reformat the data for you, beautifully clean up things. Same thing with regex. I have to admit I'm very bad at putting the right regex together. It takes me a lot of iterations to come up with that, how to extract the right information for a string from a string. But the GPT-4, fantastic. Ask it that these are the kind of strings, this is the kind of information I'm looking for. It can do the work for you, or it can generate or suggest regex that can be useful for that. Code documentation, it can look at the code and then produce good documentation. Code optimization, refactoring, rewrites. There have been a lot of enthusiasm that if you have to change the language from Python to R, the generative AI agents are actually quite good at that. They can rewrite the code from one language to another, or using one utility to another, and they're pretty good at that. Unit test generation and automation, again, if the code is there, generating the unit tests around it, and some integration tests as well. The Gen AIs and the GPT-4 especially has shown a lot of promise for that as well. So what does that mean actually, combining all the discussion that we had on software engineering so far? So as I said in the previous slide, that there was a report that said that junior developers are getting more productivity boost as opposed to more mature programmers. And then there's an alternative point of view, which says that actually senior people can use AI tools more effectively because it makes programming more fun for them. And they know how to debug those programs. Whereas for junior programmers, they may not have the ability to understand and evaluate the shortcomings of the data that or the code that AI produces. So are junior developers more getting more advantage, or senior developers getting more advantage? Again, the jury's out. However, I would say that we have seen that the industry always prefers people who can solve problems in diverse ways. And there is value in having people who are cross-trained with these tools. So whether you are a junior developer or an experienced one, you should not be dependent on these tools, but you should also not be oblivious to them either. All right. Moving on. What else? Oh, yeah, that was another thing that I wanted to bring up. When I said that code generation is buggy, but there is another reason why I think it will not be possible for Gen AIs to take over programs and programming. And that is the concept of software that delights. This is a piece that appeared on Communications of the ACM by Peter Dennings, who is also the chief editor for Ubiquity. And he argues that the software quality evaluation, it has changed significantly from the code level measures of the 1970s to user level assessments of today. So he actually proposed these 6 levels at which users assess the software quality. And the different levels reflect the different degrees of emphasis on user satisfaction. So program correctness is essential, but it's limited to the very first level. And then the highest level is delight. And how he defines delight is that that's the level when the product goes well beyond the user's initial expectations, and it produces new, unexpected, and sometimes surprising positive effects. That's the software that user expresses great delight with, that that this is the software that the producer actually understood them and their world and their use cases, and then they produce this, and that these are the ones that become killer apps, if you will. Examples, well, going a little bit back, Unix system, it delighted users. It was much more than they expected. VisiCalc, which is a precursor to spreadsheets, Microsoft Word, iPhone and Android operating systems, which made the entire app market possible. Ride-hailing apps, Uber was the first one in that. So, so these the software producers, they look for designs and services that can produce genuine delight. That is the thing that will make them the most money. That is the thing that will get them the most fame. And that's the highest level, the software that delights. And that requires a lot of human intuition and understanding of the world. Um, I would argue, and Peter Dennings argue, that the current state of the art of the LLM coding, it does not even attain the lowest level of quality, which is level 1, software that fulfills all basic promises. It's not even there. Getting to level 4, we don't see it happening. So we are not going to see the end of programming or programmers anytime soon. All right, let's brief look at some of the future aspects, and then we'll stop for questions. So prediction is very difficult, especially if it's about the future. I really like this quote because it's being said that it has been authored by a Nobel laureate, Niels Bohr, all the way from him to Yogi Bear. It has been attributed to all of them, but the quote makes sense. Um, so this notion that LLMs will soon encompass all human knowledge once they absorb every scrap of text, speech, and image on the internet. It's again far-fetched. My reaction to that is that no, it's not going to happen. Why? Because, well, because the documents recorded on the internet are overwhelmingly in English, and they come from only a subset of all people. Many people live in oppressive countries where they are not allowed to speak up or record their views. then massive troves of recorded data is in non-digital form. So for example, the Venetian state archives from Venice. So they have like the wisdom of the Republic of Venice for over 1,000 years. They say that it's 80 kilometers of shelves of paper of that data that has never been made available digitally. And then this massive chunk of human expression is not represented in any of the data that can be used to train LLMs. So even if the LLMs can absorb every bit of piece of data on the internet, it's not going to encompass all human knowledge. Talking more about the data, these are some of the issues I'll not go into depth with because they have widespread acknowledgement. Deepfakes, of course, there's a lot of concern about the ease with which troublemakers can create these false documents, images, videos. Copyrights is a burning issue that research and whistleblowers have confirmed that much of the material used in training LLMs is often copyrighted and is used without consent or payment to the rights holder. In fact, there is a very famous all eyes on the case, uh, the legal case where New York Times have sued OpenAI and Microsoft for copyright infringement. And it says that OpenAI trained on millions of its articles and it's seeking damages. And that's a case which has a lot of eyes on because that will determine the future direction of the issues of copyrights and IP infringement. Then synthetic data. That's something we just talked less about, but it has the attention of the research community. I've quoted one research paper here as well. So what is the issue here? The LLMs are, of course, populating the internet with ads and documents and summaries and translations and blogs and what more. And then these generations can then be used to train the future iterations of the LLMs. So basically, it's training on the data that it or its peers produced earlier. And because the synthetic data is noisy representation of the original sources, the quality decreases with each new generation. One research group has actually claimed that after just 5 iterations of this producing data and then learning on that and producing data and learning of that, the LLM output becomes totally nonsensical. So it has to be taken seriously if we are to sustain the benefits of training from large-scale data scraped from the web. There should be a differentiation from the data on the web and the synthetic data created by LLMs. It has not gathered attention as the other matters as yet because the synthetic data still is limited, but it's only going to grow exponentially. So something to keep in mind. Unresolved issues, we'll see how they get resolved. And then the last bit I want to talk about is the compute power. Again, something which is not really talked about, but it's very important. So the proliferation of these AI technologies and data centers, so there's this massive need, there's this driving surge in power demand, the likes of which have not been seen before, I would say. The need for compute power, for electricity is doubling almost like every 6 months. That's the general notion here. And a couple of pointers from some research done by some institutes. So Goldman Sachs says that a ChatGPT query needs 10 times more electricity than a simple Google search. 10 times more electricity. And then the data center's power demand will grow 160% by 2030. Another such claim by Allen Institute for AI says that one query of ChatGPT uses approximately as much electricity as could light one light bulb for about 20 minutes. So it's expensive. It's expensive in terms of electricity and the compute power. And then there are some studies that even say that the data reported is not even accurate. There is a Guardian analysis that was done, which says that the emissions from the in-house data centers from Google's and Microsoft, Meta, and Apple, they are underreported by 7 times or by 600%. They're not even reporting the correct emission, which results from the compute power that it takes to train their data centers. I was reading an article which says that, sure, we talk about a lot of existential risk with AI, that it will become sentient and then it will maybe control nuclear weapons or do something else. But maybe the real existential risk is the climate change escalated by the exponentially growing power needs that AI data centers need. So what has been some of the recent developments? Very recent, like a couple of months old, recent. So in September 2024, Microsoft has started a deal with the nuclear power plant in Pennsylvania. It's called the 3 Mile Island Nuclear Plant, and it's now in a contract to use the energy from that nuclear plant for 20 years. And the energy that this nuclear plant produces, it's estimated that it's enough to power roughly 800,000 homes every year. But all of that power will be used by Microsoft for the next 20 years. Similarly, just this month in October, Amazon said that it's investing in small nuclear reactors, and Google has made a similar announcement. So nuclear energy, yes, it's clean. It has least amount of carbon emission. But nuclear energy is also, it produces electricity, which is the most expensive form of electricity. And that gets you into the world of messy government grants and taxation rules and private contracts. And some, if not all of this cost will get passed on to the consumer. It's extremely expensive. Rather, it's been said that the industry thinks that they will find customers uh, who would like the carbon-free attribute so much that they will be able to pay a premium for it. And maybe in distant future, with a few iterations and some next generations of reactors, the cost may eventually come down, but it's going to be extremely expensive for now. So wrapping it all up, AI has immense potential in various fields: coding, customer support, healthcare, content creation. However, we should not forget that the LLMs generate responses based on patterns in their training data and not genuine understanding of what's going on. There are ethical issues, especially for anthropomorphism, data privacy issues, IP rights issues, limitations in the training data, and of course, the exorbitant power consumption. And all of these need careful considerations. We should certainly embrace AI for productivity gains and creativity. However, we should also maintain a critical perspective and make sure that we are that well, let me just say that there was a quote from Roy Amara, who was an American futurist, and he said that we tend to overestimate the effect of a technology in the short run and underestimate the effect in the long run. So I think that closes all these arguments beautifully, that we should approach generative AI with cautious optimism. We should adapt, we should have fun, but we should also balance the enthusiasm for innovation with thoughtful critical analysis and the real impact on society. So let me stop here. Of course, open to any questions. Any of the research that I've added in this presentation, I'm very willing to share that with the audience members if they are interested.
Um, Thank you so much. I am very grateful from ACM Human Initiative for the sponsorship of this amazing talk, very interesting topic, and a very experienced speaker. What a kind of fluency in the talk. Thank you so much, Berto.
Of course.
So we will start with the Q&A session. So you have here in the chat, I will try to read. So it said, as a woman, what it was or is your motivation for study or to try for data science, math, engineering, and AI?
I love this question. Well, I will give a lot of credit, initial credit at least, to my father. So as I was growing up, we are three sisters. My eldest sister is a medical doctor. My second sister, she went into business administration. And I didn't want to do either of those, mostly out of siblings rivalry. So I was looking for something else to do. And around that time, that was late 1990s, computer science was just making an entrance in Pakistan. And it was actually my father who suggested that you are good with math and logic. How about you try out this new field and we'll see where it goes. So at the intermediate level, I started studying computer science and of course loved the field, and I'm still here with that. But that was the initial, I would give credit to my father because at that time I did not have the insight to pick the right field. But later on at the master's level, when I was doing my master's and I decided to go for PhD, that was because I wanted to have my voice heard. And by my voice, I mean a couple of different characteristics. As I said, I came from Pakistan, which is not as advanced, kind of left behind as far as the technological revolution is concerned. So I wanted the perspectives that I bring from my background to be part of the future of computing. Secondly, I wanted the perspective as a woman who has grown up in a more conservative country and then is studying this field and is a minority in the field. I wanted those perspectives to be part of the future. I think a lot of the times we have concerns about where the technology is going in general, but we somehow shy away from becoming a part of that conversation. So my motivation for most of my career was that I want my voice to be part of the conversation. Whether it affects it or not, that's a different story, but at least I want a seat at the table. And that was my motivation to join ACM Women as well, and now being part of its executive committee. And that's the opportunity I want to offer other women as well. So I'll reiterate, if we have women in computing in the audience, or if you know some, please ask them to consider volunteering with us and take the benefits of having this mentoring, celebrating, encouraging group of women globally, which is available for you.
Okay, thank you for this answer. So now we have real oral question. So what is
Detecting,
that
yeah, go ahead, sir.
is now talking?
Hello, good afternoon.
Hi.
Menendez here. First, I want to thank you for your talk. It is very interesting, and I think it's very inspiring for everybody. I wanted to ask you something like, what are the things that you find more fascinating about these fields, and which recommendations could you give to girls and women in general to try to explore these topics?
Yeah. So that's again a great question. And I see there's one on the chat as well. So we'll get to that after this one. So my something that I advocate for quite often is that data science is a field which can actually act as an equalizer for various groups which are underrepresented in computing in general. It's it's science, but it's also a lot of intuition. So it's not hardcore science, which sometimes some groups, women in areas, are not as interested in. I'm making a very general statement. Of course, it's not applicable for 100% of the population, but the engineering sciences like hardware engineering, that's very hardcore engineering hardcore hard engineering discipline, and there is seen to be less interest from women engineers in that side. Similarly, the field of DevOps, which is of course very up and coming, but less interest seen there. Similarly, robotics interest is increasing, but still slightly less than some other fields. Data science is a field which is led by intuition. It's not led by code. It's not led by fancy algorithm. It's led by intuition, because the eventual goal of data science is not a fancy algorithm or certain numbers. The eventual goal of data science is to provide value to the organization that you are working towards, or whatever entity you are doing the analysis for. And defining value comes from intuition. What is value? It could be monetary gains, it could be market goodwill, it could be customer goodwill, it could be competitive advantage. Defining that value and then taking that intuition into data, into algorithms, into the scientific side of things, that's something I have personally seen women thrive at. Because, again, a very general umbrella statement, but because of their lived experiences, women have a certain intuition on value and where to look in the data for insights. So I have seen in my experience that young women that I mentor, I give lectures at schools, at universities as well. And then, of course, a lot in who are early to mid-career professional women in the industry. Data science is a field which has a lot of potential because, of course, the field is expanding, it's exploding. So there's a lot of opportunity. And there's also a lot of interest because it's a science which is led by intuition, not by code and algorithms. So that's a message I would love to share forward. Do you have a question in the chat about how do we detect hallucinations and how do we prepare students for this? Again, an really active hot area of research. Uh, First things first, LLMs will almost always hallucinate because the way they are built, that they use statistics or they just use probability to find the next most next closest word to the conversation that has been going so far. We cannot change that aspect of its architecture. It will always look for the next closest word to put in the conversation. What we can do is narrow down the field from where it picks that next word. So if it's wide open and it has all these words to choose from, it will probably hallucinate more. If it's more focused and carefully curated, the probability of hallucination will be low. So there is this whole area of research which is called, the term that is used is RAG, which basically stands for retrieval augmented generation. And in those cases, we actually tell LLMs that, hey, look for answer within these documents. Those could be research papers, those could be books, those could be user manuals, those could be your company's internal data. So we instruct the LLM that, sure, find your answer, go play, but play within this playground. So that limits the overall scope of the information that the LLM is trying to get the answers from, and that does reduce hallucination by a huge amount. But then again, retrieval augmented generation could only be done for specific cases, like maybe in healthcare, we have that RAG enforcement, or maybe in some fields of education, we can have RAG enforcement, or other areas. Companies can have RAG enforcement for the chatbots that they may create for their customers. But overall, in general, ChatGPT, if you go to chat.openai.com or go to Claude or Bing, whatever you ask there, it will be prone to hallucinations. So double check that. Any information that you get, please double check that. In fact, one of the proposals that we made a couple of months ago for education sector, because there is a lot of concern in the education sector, and that's the company I work with, that there might be plagiarism, there might be these hallucinations. So what do we do? Shall we ban generative AI apps in schools and universities? That's not going to happen. The genie is out of the bottle. For better or for worse, it's here to stay. But what you can do is use it in innovative ways. For example, one of the suggestion is that instead of poo-pooing generative AI, how about you bring it into the class and ask students to, hey, get a response for this problem statement from generative AI, and then let's critique it together. Let's see where it failed. Let's see how we can make it better. Or take a problem statement and let's ask 3 different models to generate responses, Anthropic, Gemini, and maybe ChatGPT. And then let's compare those 3. Let's see which one got what text better, or which one got which side of the argument better. So integrate it in instructive ways, because it's not going to go away, unfortunately. And then if you can restrict the domain, then yes, retrieval augmented generation has shown a lot of promise.
Okay, thank you for these answers. So we have 2 more questions. The first one is in the chat. So it says, how to detect a hallucination generated by AI, or how to prepare a student for this?
Yeah, sorry, I jumped the gun. This was the one I just answered. So this has been done.
I have another question.
Please.
Again. I'm a professor at heart, so I care a lot about our students' preparation. So I was wondering, as teachers, as professors, how can we help our students to have, let's call it, a healthy relationship with their coding abilities and this generative artificial intelligence? How can we help them to get into a healthy relationship among these students?
Yeah. Dr. Rice, if you also can connect the professor with me, there are a few very good research studies that I would love to share with her, which explain some of the things I'm going to share her in more detail. So I really like those papers. So healthy relationship, it it is important. So I'm going to focus a healthy relationship more on the context of students. I'll go back to the statement that the genie is out of the bottle. The more we try to restrict them or say them not to use this technology or it's bad, the more they will be tempted to use that. So you have to bring that technology as an additional entity into the educational framework or your class. Consider that an additional student in your class, which has slightly different skill set. Embracing it is important, because only when you tell the students that it's okay to use this technology, but use it for A, B, and C because of the reasons X, Y, and Z, this is going to stick a lot better than a simple just refuting that this technology exists or it could be used. One thing that being a NORAD Inc., we work on a software which teaches English grammar and writing for K-12 students. And of course, there's a huge concern there as well that if we give them an essay, if the teachers give them an essay to write, they will just ask GPT to write it. So some of the things that I talked of creating flipped classrooms and bringing in ChatGPT as a learning opportunity is one thing. The other thing is, going back to the healthy relationship theme, we should put in more emphasis in teaching students what is important. So for example, for K-12 education, instead of saying that the output or the essay is the actual intent of the exercise, we should shift the focus on the process, that learning to write arguments and iterating on those statements that help you think better, that help you convey your point of view better. So the actual intent of this exercise is the process. It's not the end product. And sure, generative AI can fake the end product. It cannot fake the process. So yes, it's a lot more effort and a lot more responsibility that falls on educators at all levels. And we have to up our game on this front. And there are a couple of fantastic studies I'd love to share with you, both for K-12 education and also for college education and for research students as well.
Okay, well, it was the last question, so we have some technical problems here, but I will read the certificate of your participation. So it said, la Red Mexicana de Ingeniería de Software acknowledged Dr. Bushra Abdul by successfully present the conference titled Generative AI in Action, Redefining Innovation and Problem Solving for the 12th International Conference in Software Engineering Research and Innovation, CONISOP 2024, held at the Universidad del Mar from October 28 to November 1st in Puerto Escondido, Oaxaca, Mexico. Signed by Dr. Alejandra Menendez Ortiz, local chair, and me, Dr. Reyes Ramirez, the general chair of this conference. So thank you so much, Dr. Bushra. We hope that in future you can again participate with us in this events of the National Network of Software Engineering. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for the invitation. Thank you. I appreciate the time.